Hey everybody, Craig Egan here. Just wanted to have a quick discussion about some common anti-vax arguments and objections and really what makes them similar in my mind. I've been arguing with anti-vax nuts for about 5 or 6 years. And if you were to ask me to describe all of the anti-vaccination arguments and objections and everything they throw at you with one word, if I was going to pick one word to describe it all, that word to me would be disingenuous. Now, that word might be kind of a big word for some of my YouTube commenters, so let me explain exactly what it means and give you an example. Disingenuous means that an argument is not sincere, that it's not made in good faith, and that it probably isn't the real objection. For instance, let's say I've got a buddy at work that we're lunch pals. Every day we take off from work, we go have lunch, different place all the time. We go have Thai food, we got burgers, we have pizza, whatever. And so one day I say, hey, let's go over to this restaurant over here. And he says, no, I don't really like that place. I say, okay, that's fine. Can I ask why? What it is? I've been there a few times. It's pretty nice. What don't you like about that restaurant? He says, I just don't like the coffee. I don't like the coffee. I think it tastes kind of bitter to me. And I think to myself, okay, that's fair, I guess, but I've had the coffee there. It's pretty good. I'm not sure why you would object to it. It's not fancy, but it's fine. And I almost get trapped into arguing with him about the quality of the coffee at this restaurant until I realize, wait a minute. We have lunch every single day together, and you always order Diet Coke. I have never seen you order a coffee at any restaurant. So in my mind, I started to think maybe coffee is not the real objection here. Maybe he's got another reason he doesn't like to go there. Maybe somebody was rude to him, or maybe an ex-girlfriend works there and he's embarrassed to tell me that. But he's come up in his head with an objection he thinks will work, which he says to me, the coffee's no good. But I start to think maybe that argument is disingenuous. Maybe it's not the coffee that he's objecting to because, honestly, I've never seen him order coffee anywhere else. I always just see him order a Diet Coke. So it puts doubt in my mind that the argument that he's making is a sincere one. When you talk to anti-vaxxers, try to keep this in mind when you talk about their objections, because they will try to flood you with a ton of objections, a bunch of BS, and if you don't have 20 studies in your pocket to refute them on the spot, they'll just declare themselves the winner. But you can really turn it around on them. Let me give you an example. So thimerosal was a preservative used in a lot of vaccines. It's also used in eye drops. It's used in tattoo ink. It is specifically there to prevent a fungal infection. Something that can be very bad and life-threatening to somebody if it happens. So this is a preservative put in vaccines to make it safer. Of course, up is down, left is right, right is wrong. In the anti-vax world, they live in bizarro land where anything put into a vaccine to make it safer is really making it less safe. So they claimed that thimerosal was causing autism. Now, this didn't have any evidence behind it. There was no reason to think that this was the case, but anti-vaxxers scared enough people that there was enough outrage that this component was removed from all childhood vaccines. And of course, if that was the real objection, that should have been the end of it. You take the stuff out, anti-vaxxers say, thank you for addressing our concerns. We're going to go back to vaccinating our kids now. Unfortunately, of course, that doesn't work like that. And that's why you can't cater to or negotiate with anti-vaxxers, because they'll make an objection like, we want thimerosal removed from vaccines. You remove it, and they just move on. They're like, well, what about aluminum? What about formaldehyde? What about fetal cells? What about all of these things? And so it doesn't matter what you do. You can take them out. Take aluminum, for example. They claim that the aluminum salts used as an adjuvant in vaccines to make them work better is dangerous. So instead of pulling out 20 different studies showing that that's not the case, just ask them. Say, oh, okay, so you object to aluminum in vaccines? You're cool with the vaccines that don't use aluminum, right? Because aluminum adjuvants are only used in vaccines with a killed virus cell, not ones that are attenuated or weakened. No, of course not. Of course not. They object to all vaccines. It doesn't really matter. And of course, if you went the thimerosal route and took aluminum out of the vaccine, it wouldn't make it any safer. It would actually make it work less effectively, and it wouldn't change an anti-vaxxer's mind anyway. They would just point at the vaccine that has less effectiveness and say, see, I told you vaccines don't work. Well, yeah, it works. It doesn't work as well because we took out the thing that was making it work well on your demands. And it didn't matter. You still went on and you still object to all vaccines. Fetal cell lines, same thing. A lot of people, anti-vaxxers will say, okay, well, these fetal cell lines, basically there was an abortion done in 1960 something. They took cells from that and they have replicated them ever since. And they use those cells to grow a virus to kill, to put in a vaccine. Some anti-vaxxers will be like, oh, that's we object to that on moral and religious grounds. Well, that's fine, but have you ever met a single anti-vaxxer who was against fetal cell line use in a vaccine, but were completely okay with vaccines that don't use those lines? Because not all vaccines use those fetal cells in production. But there's never that differentiation with anti-vaxxers. They don't care. It's not the real objection. If it was the real objection, you would see anti-vaxxers who only object to the vaccines that use fetal cell lines, but completely support the ones that don't. If you took those fetal cell lines out, they would complain about whatever you replaced it with. If you used cow cells, they would object to that. If you used dog cells, they object to that. If you used egg cells, they object to that. They object to anything you put into a vaccine. It doesn't matter what it is. So you can't negotiate with them. You can't cater to their demands because it doesn't matter. Even if you did, it wouldn't change their mind. You'll see this also with demands for double-blind placebo testing. Now, in many types of drug or vaccine production or testing, initial testing, they will use different kind of testing techniques to test whether it's safe and effective. One of those kinds of techniques is placebo testing, and even more so, double-blind placebo testing, which the patient and the doctor neither know what the person in the tester is getting. And so anti-vaxxers, a lot of times they don't use these in vaccine production, though, because it can be unethical to have children who think they're vaccinated and they're not. It's unnecessary because vaccines don't really fall into the same category of things that fall under a placebo effect. It's not like when you give somebody a pain pill and you give them a sugar pill and say, did your pain go away? And they say, oh yeah, I think it did go away. Well, that's the placebo effect. But you don't give somebody a placebo and they're all of a sudden immune to polio. Or you don't get, on the flip side, you don't give somebody a placebo and all of a sudden they have autism, right? The placebo effect doesn't really factor in very much into vaccine testing. But sometimes they do it. And here's how you can tell that even this argument is a disingenuous argument. When Gardasil was first tested, it was tested in a double-blind placebo test. The gold standard, as the anti-vaxxers like to call it, of scientific testing. Now, because this is the case, you should theoretically see some anti-vaxxers who object to every vaccine under the sun, but they're okay with Gardasil because Gardasil went through a double-blind placebo test. But is that the case? Do you ever see an anti-vaxxer like that? Of course not. They hate Gardasil more than they hate all the other vaccines. Even though it was done with a double-blind placebo test, just like they're always demanding, it doesn't help. They don't care. They hate it more. Gardasil is actually one of the safest and most effective vaccines for the viruses that it targets. Out there on the market, went through extreme testing, went through all the testing that they demand, and they hate that vaccine more than all the other vaccines because they don't care. Anti-vaxxers will claim all up and down that vaccines are not safety tested well enough, that there needs to be more safety testing on vaccines. But go into an anti-vax group and post a link to a vaccine safety test currently underway and see how many people have supported. They hate it. It's nothing but hate. They will go on how much they hate vaccine testing, even though it's what they've demanded. Even though they will go all day long demanding vaccines need more safety testing, show them a vaccine safety test in production, and they'll hate it because it's not a real objection. It's a disingenuous objection. The fact is that anti-vaxxers have just programmed in their head that vaccines suck and that everything involved with them sucks. And so it doesn't matter what ingredient it is. It doesn't matter what condition or disease or whatever they're trying to link vaccines into causing. It doesn't matter the mountains of evidence you can give them because none of their objections are real objections. You could satisfy their objection. You could say, look, this is clearly not the case. And they'll just move on to another one. And this is why it's so infuriating and so pointless sometimes to argue with the hardcore anti-vax nuts. Because their real objections are not real objections. They're fake objections. They're disingenuous. And they're just trying to convince people of a laundry list of claims that are bullshit and are scaring parents away from vaccinating their kids. So don't fall for it. And next time you're arguing with an anti-vaxxer, try using that tactic. Try saying, okay, fine, take it out of the equation. You don't like aluminum? You're okay with vaccines that don't use aluminum, right? You're okay with vaccines that don't use fetal cells, right? You're okay with that vaccines that did go under a double-blind placebo study, right? No? Then go fuck yourself. You're full of shit. Anyway, that's my thought for the day. Namaste. We're going to get back out on the road, following the anti-vax bus very soon. Currently, we're hoping for Kansas, Missouri, Des Moines, Iowa, Minneapolis, Minnesota, but the Vax team is also being very vague about their future plans, so we're watching them closely because they may change their route or their dates, and we'll follow them too. But until then, keep vaccinating your kids, keep fighting the good fight. Namaste. We'll see you soon.